So this meeting is being recorded. I want to welcome everybody here. My name is Astrid Raffin-Pellos. I'm the Volunteer Services Manager at Volunteer Hospice of Clallam County. I'm very happy to present this program today with Jonathan Prescott from Wise Caregiving. So Wise Caregiving, just those two words, for me, they immediately make me slow down. The word wise, the wisdom in it, and the caregiving is like how we care for people and how we can do it wisely. So I took a breath and I'm going to take another one. And I want to give a little bit of history for those of you who are new on our meeting here, for who this is the first time. Volunteer Hospice is 47 years old. Was founded in 1978 by a nurse, Rose Crumb. We are in Washington State, and we are literally a unicorn in the hospice world. We are local, independent, nonprofit, and we offer hospice and palliative care without billing anybody. No government agencies, Medicare, Medicaid, no private insurance company, and not the patients. We are entirely free. Our income is mostly from donations and a few grants. And this freedom, this flexibility we have means that we can create programs such as this one. And our programs are open to anyone in the community. We have a medical equipment lending closet, a grief and bereavement program, and the soul care program, where we do this bi-monthly speaker series on Zoom, and we also host 3 monthly desk cafes in the little towns where we are. The next speaker will be in January 14. I would recommend you to check our website, volunteerhospice.org, for details. Today, our talk is titled Boundaries, Caring for Yourself While Caring for Others. And even though, for those of you who were here last September, you may remember we also addressed boundaries. So the titles might be similar, but I think you are in for a very different approach. Jonathan Prescott, John, will talk about contemplative care, leading with the heart and responding with expertise. Contemplative care is grounded in the intention to serve, a commitment to explore the human condition, a willingness to be present with suffering, and a desire to understand the nature of life and death. Today's session will focus on boundaries, not as barriers, but as bridges, tools to protect yourself while connecting more deeply with others. Through this lens, the boundaries become an act of compassion, both for yourself and for those you care for. Expect to leave the session with a renewed perspective on human interaction, one that is both empowering and transformative. Jonathan Prescott is a board-certified clinical chaplain and a pastoral counselor. As a long-time ordained student of Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh, Jonathan's practice is to support people experiencing illness and end of life, foster effective caregiving, and reconnect people with their innate wisdom. Here's that word again, wisdom and compassion. Jonathan has studied with Dharmacharya Eileen Kiera and Jack Duffy Roshi at the Mountain Lamp Community, and with Frank Ostazeski of the Metta Institute and Zen Hospice Project. He integrates the Buddhist psychology of Charlotte Joko Beck in his practice and teaching. I hope that you will come away from this meeting with a new way of thinking about interaction, about how to protect yourself while at the same time connecting more deeply. Welcome, John. It's with great pleasure that we welcome you here today.
Thank you, Astrid, for that kind introduction. Hi, everybody. Gosh, I get to meet a whole new group of people today. This is really lovely. I have a request. If it's possible for you to have your camera on during our time together, that helps me so much, because then you become a person and not just a name on a screen. So no pressure. If you'd rather not have it on, that's okay. But if you can, Then I know a little bit more about you as we're spending time together. Oh, that's nice. I'm seeing all kinds of faces appear. Lovely. I like to put you near the top of my screen, so I really am talking to you. Well, you got a little bit of a sense of who I am, but I want to flesh that out a little bit because I'm just this face on the screen. Why should you pay attention to me or give your time to this adventure together? I've been a contemplative all my life, my parents tell me. I was born into a family that was not contemplative, cowboys and partiers and all this sort of thing. And my parents talk about me sitting on the curb in my little blue coat with my hood up for hours, and they didn't know what to make of me. And I found my way to meditation practice, and I've had a daily meditation practice for 45 years now. And that led me in a lot of different ways, eventually to become a student of Thich Nhat Hanh's, which was really pivotal for me in opening my heart. I found my way also towards becoming a chaplain in healthcare. And I started in hospitals, and then I went to cancer care. And after that, I found where my heart really was, which was in hospice. The closer I got to the end of life, the more comfortable I felt, the more real things got. And you all know this too, I'm sure. It's just, there's no room for BS at the end of life. It's real. And I learned so much from my patients and from my colleagues and from the families of my patients. And I had done this work for quite some time, and I was starting to get burned out. And I realized I'd been with something like 1,400 people as they died. And it was enough. But I had all this inside me that I had been given, all this wisdom that I had been given by all these people. And I wanted to give that away while I still could before I died. So I started a nonprofit called Wise Caregiving. And that has been the vehicle by which I've been giving away what it was that was given to me about how to be an open hearted caregiver and companion to people that are suffering or ill or dying. And now I'm in the process of giving away that nonprofit. So I'm stepping back from that. So I just feel very lucky to have received so much. And you are helping me fulfill what feels like a purpose for this part of my life, which is to give away what I've been given. So thank you for doing that. Thank you for being here. Now, what are we going to do? Astrid said that you had previously talked about boundaries, and my experience with boundaries in my professional training was that often those boundaries were set up as things that protected one person from another person. That, you know, the boundary of if you are a professional in the healthcare field, for instance, you have a set of boundaries that you use so that you aren't tempted to take advantage of the people that you care for. So those are really, really important boundaries. But today, what I want to talk about is boundaries that build on those protective boundaries, but they also help us connect with people. The protective boundaries aren't enough for us to engage open-heartedly and compassionately with others. We have to have a kind of boundaries that help us connect and connect really deeply. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about that, and I'll offer you a simple model that I hope you will take into your life and use, and you're going to have a chance to teach me how to use that model today, because every time I do this, I learn something new about how that model can be applied, and you have the wisdom to do that. So that's the agenda. Does that sound like okay way to spend our time together? Yeah. Okay. Before we do that, I've found that for myself, it's hard for me to make a transition into a time like this. I have a great deal of momentum built up from the concerns of my life, and that I might let that momentum just carry me right past the significance of this present moment. So I wanted to take a few minutes for us to slow down and let that momentum go. So I live in the San Juan Islands, and in the Anacortes on the mainland, there's an oil refinery there where these big tankers come from Alaska, and they load this crude oil into the refinery. The refinery makes it into all kinds of magical things, and then that stuff gets loaded onto train cars. One day I looked at one of those trains full of oil cars, and I saw that there was more than 100 cars, and I got really curious. I thought, how does that get stopped? When it's time to stop the momentum of all that oil in those oil cars, how do they do it? I just picture this little person in the locomotive pulling on a brake. How do they actually stop all that momentum? And I realized I'm a lot like those train cars. I have lots of different kinds of momentum that's pushing me forward. The momentum of my family and the way my family works, and the momentum of my society, and the momentum of my own personal concerns. And every one of those is like a train car behind me, pushing me forward, pushing me forward, pushing me forward. And I found that if I could stop that momentum, I could be far more present for what I needed to do. So let's stop our momentum right now. And I've got a bell here, and I'll use this bell to invite us to slow down. And I'd like to guide us in a little bit of a short relaxation. So let's begin with the sound of the bell. You might want to put your body into a position in which you can feel supported by the earth. Maybe you're sitting on a chair and you can feel your bottom anchored solidly to the earth through that chair. Maybe you can feel your feet touching the floor, and through that, touching the solidity of the earth. On top of that contact with the earth, we can then begin to rest our body in an upright, solid, stable posture. I can feel my spine on top of my hips. I can move back and forth a little bit to find where it's balanced, so it takes no effort to hold upright. I can feel my shoulders stacked there on top of my spine, moving them a little bit until they feel solid, balanced. I can feel my head balanced at the top of my spine, moving it a little bit side to side, front to back, till I find the place where it is balanced, effortless. Touching the earth in this way helps us remember that we are connected to all things here to support us, all things here to hold us. And once we're in this comfortable, balanced position, we may want to turn to our breath, noticing the breath coming in and out. The breath is an amazing part of our body, both under our control and automatic. Our breath has been breathing since before we were born, when our mother breathed for us. And then automatically, moment after moment throughout our lives, the breath comes in and out. But when we bring our attention to our breath, then we can use the breath as an anchor. An anchor that solidifies us and holds us steady even in the most difficult situations. And that anchor of our breath can slow our momentum. So feel your breath for a few in-breaths and out-breaths, and let it be the anchor that slows your momentum. And as you experience that slowed momentum, that solidity, you may begin to get inklings of your own wisdom bubbling up, showing you that you are enough just as you are. You may know more in an hour than you knew before, but right now, as you are enough. Well, I feel a lot better. I don't know about you. That was good for me. Excuse me. Yeah. I found that kind of a practice is absolutely essential for me being able to be a wise caregiver in the world, because I can only offer someone what I have inside of me. And if I have just rushing and busyness, that's all I can offer them. So maybe together, now that we've slowed down a little bit, we have a little bit more solidity and a little bit more access to our wisdom. Okay, well, let's jump into the heart of things here. I'm going to share my screen so that we can look at this model together. All right. Does everybody see that? It's just a simple little circle. Yeah, okay, I'm just readjusting you so I can still see you here. Okay, so this model that I'm going to present is about how to connect with people in a wise way that both protects you and them and allows both of you to connect in such a way that you can share each other's experience and hopefully make each other's experience a little bit better. Now, I talked a few minutes ago about those protective boundaries. I just want to return to that before I get into our model. Those protective boundaries that say, I will not take advantage of you in a number of ways, need to be there. So I just want to voice what those protective boundaries are, because some of us may have gotten some of those in our professional training, but others may not have. So for instance, I, as a caregiver, need to protect the people I care from by ensuring that I don't exploit the people I care for financially. I don't exploit those people sexually. I don't exploit those people in terms of power imbalances. These are really important things, and they have to be present. If they aren't present, we really can't move forward with these other kind of boundaries. But I trust that you, because you're here, you're already aware of these kinds of imperatives about protecting people from abuse that could come from you as one who offers care. But if those are in place, now we get to take another step. That's very important that most of us don't get training in. So here's the model. You see on your screen a circle. That circle represents the person that you are caring for. This could be professional as a patient. This could be personal as your mother or your loved one or your child. But the circle represents the person that you're caring for. Simple enough, huh? Okay. Now, if we go to the next element of the model, there's a footprint. The footprint shows where your attention is in relationship to the person that you're caring for. So the circle is the person. The footprint indicates where your attention is related to that person. Got it? So just two elements. The circle is the person. The footprint is your attention. Now I'm going to show you 4 different ways that we can use this simple circle and footprint to illustrate ways that we can connect with people and ways that we can set boundaries with people. So you'll see that along the left column there are 2 different ways that we can connect. Across the right column are 2 different ways that we can set boundaries. Across the top is what I hope to move us towards, and across the bottom is the way that we typically do it. So this gives you just an overview. Don't worry, we're going to go into each one of those in some detail, but I wanted you to see the whole landscape before we jumped in so that you had a sense of where we were going. So let's start with not our ideal, but let's start with the way that we typically do it. And when I say we here, I mean me, but I don't think I'm that different from other people. And I've been talking with people about this boundary model for a long time, and I see that people that do this kind of care really chronically do this way that isn't too sustainable. So I'm going to start there. I call this first stance being swept away. And you'll notice both feet are inside the circle. And what that means is that you saw a need with this person that's in front of you, and you said, I can do that. I can help. I'm here. And you jumped in with both feet. It's a natural reaction for many people, but not all people, to do this. And I think that the fact that this is so common among caregivers says something really lovely about you as a caregiver. You jump in with both feet because you have the empathy inside of you to recognize that another person is suffering and that you can help. And I think that's a really wonderful thing that says about you. And that is not universally true of people. There are other people who see someone in need and they are not moved to help. They turn their back and walk away. Or they may be one of those people that don't have those protective boundaries I mentioned earlier, and they see a person in need as someone they can exploit. And unfortunately, we're getting a lot of reinforcement for that point of view right now from our higher levels of our government. We're seeing, see someone in need, that's someone I can exploit. But I don't think that's true of most of us here. I don't think we'd be here if we were the sort of person that sees the world that way. I think we're likely to be the kind of person that sees a need and says, oh, I can help with that. And then you jump in with both feet. So it's lovely in that way. There's a problem. If both of your feet are in that circle, what that means is that all of your attention goes to that person. You have seen their issue and you have made their issue your issue. You have been subsumed by their difficulty or their suffering. And that unfortunately is not sustainable. None of us can work that way. You know that, especially what I found doing this end of life work professionally, that the need for loving care is effectively infinite, and I am not. I'm finite. So if I have both my feet in my patient's circle, that is inevitably going to lead me to burnout. There's no recognition there that I am a human, that I'm present, that I have any awareness of myself. And so this is what I've seen happen is if you are swept away like this with both feet in people's circle, inevitably you will lead to the next stance, which is burnout. And burnout is symbolized here by both feet have stepped out of the circle, but they have also turned their back on the circle. So you might recognize this. You are swept away by someone's needs until you just can't do it anymore. And so you throw your hands up, you turn your back, and you say, I am done. And you shut down. Right? You shut down your previously open heart because you can't do it anymore. You are burned out. When you shut down your heart, you may have the idea that shutting your heart will protect you. And in one level, maybe it will. But my experience with this is when I burn out and take my feet out of the circle and face away, I don't just shut down my concern for that circle. I shut down my ability to receive the beauty and joy of life. I've not found that it's possible to just shut myself selectively. I'm shut down or I'm open. I don't get to pick where that happens. So living in this way, living burned out like this, is really kind of a hollow shell of a life. It's just a withdrawal and going into your cocoon. But what got you in this problem in the first place is that you were open-hearted enough to be swept away, right? You were the person that had that kind of empathy. So you might find that after you've gotten burned out and turned your back like this, you go home, you get a good night's sleep, maybe you have a good meal, or maybe you just get a nagging guilt that you really ought to be doing more for that person. And so what do? You immediately jump back in with both feet and get swept away again. And you stay in that circle with both your feet as long as you can until you find yourself getting so overwhelmed and frustrated that you throw your hands up again and you step out with both feet and you say, the hell with this. And you get burned out. And then you feel guilty, so you go back in. Anybody recognize this? Yeah, yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah. You know, I've been teaching this for some time now, and I still find myself doing this. I still find myself being swept away by someone's need until I get burned out. And then I say, oh, I'm doing that again. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason that I'm here is that I watched my colleagues in healthcare do this over and over and over again. And what I found was that you can, with your mind, fool yourself into thinking, oh, I can just keep doing that. But your body will eventually speak the truth. And your body will prevent you from continuing to do this. You will get sick. You will get so profoundly burned out that you will quit. Or just breaks my heart. One of my colleagues in the hospital, she worked as a discharge planner. She had way too much responsibility on her shoulders, and she did this over and over and over again until she retired, and then within months she died. I do not want this for you. I do not want this for you. I don't want this for me. I don't want any of us that have good hearts, those good hearts that cause us to jump into people's circle with both feet. I don't want us to be burned out so significantly that we get sick, we quit, and we die. So what's the alternative? Let's talk about the other way that we could go about this. This is what I call skillful connection. Now you'll notice that there's one foot inside that circle, and that means you are there for that person. You are showing up with all your open-heartedness, with your listening skills, with your technical expertise, with your patience, with all the things that you bring to another person. But there's also a foot outside the circle. And that means that at the very same time you are bringing all of those wonderful qualities of yourself to that person, you are also offering those to yourself at the same time. You are listening to them. You are listening to you. You are feeling them. You are feeling you. You are compassionate to them. You are compassionate to yourself. Now, sometimes people say, well, wait a minute. You said that I was all in when I had both feet in the circle. So I've only got one foot in the circle now. Doesn't that mean I'm really not quite as there for them as I was? And I want to make the argument that doing it like this makes you more available to the people you're caring for. And here's one of the reasons why. We have in our bodies what are called mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are a very early part of our neural development that fire in concert with the people we are close to, physically close to. And we have a lot of them. We have as many mirror neurons in our body as a cat has neurons in its brain. So there's a lot of mirror neurons in us. And those mirror neurons are firing in concert with the people that we are caring for. The scientists that study this kind of thing, they speculate that these mirror neurons were some of our early neural development that helped us be in a tribe with others, so that when the tribe was hungry and hunting, we were hungry and hunting. When the tribe was sleepy, we were sleepy, so that we worked together as a unit. We felt the same things as the other tribe members felt. And that helped us. So these mirror neurons give us an amazing diagnostic tool that we can use while we are caring for other people. When you are with another person and you have a foot out of that circle so that you're aware of yourself, you may begin to notice, for instance, I'm feeling kind of anxious right now. What is that? Is it possible that I am mirroring the anxiety of the person that I'm caring for? And frequently I found that that was the case. that I could walk into a room and just by paying attention to what was happening in my body, I had at least a clue as to what was happening in the body of the person I was caring for. If I felt joyful, I could wonder, I wonder if joy is in them. If I felt frightened, maybe there's fright happening in that person too. Very, very useful to do it this way. Another advantage to having one foot in and one foot out is that we get to play with the balance of how much attention we're offering to the person we're caring for and how much attention we're offering to ourselves. You know, in the earlier model, when we had both feet in or both feet out in the burnout stance, we were either all in with them or all out with them. It was on or off. But with this, now we get to use our own wisdom to play with the balance. How much attention do I give to the person I'm caring for, and how much do I give to myself? When I worked in a hospital, I would often enter a room, and the first thing I would do would be just to stand there with one foot a little bit in front of the other one, not so much so it became obvious that I was like doing a yoga pose or something, but just slightly one foot in front of the other. And I would lean my weight on that front foot subtly to remind myself, okay, I don't yet know this person. What do I need to know about what's happening here? And so I would give them, I don't know, 80% of my weight, still aware of myself. But then there might be a time later on in our interaction where I would notice, oh, maybe something's coming up in me, and I think, oh, I better check in with that. And so I would put more weight on my outside foot so I could begin to wonder, what am I feeling now? And is that maybe a mirroring of what this other person is feeling? So maybe I've got 60% of the weight in my outside foot at that time. But the point here is you get to play with that. And you get to use your own wisdom to tell you how to balance your attention in any one moment with the person that you're caring for. Never completely abandoning yourself as you would if you had both feet in. I found this to be very useful. Very useful. Okay, so you do this for a while. Let's say you're doing it professionally and you get to the end of your shift, or you're doing this for your loved one and it's time for you to go and tend to other aspects of your life. And so you have to step both feet out of the circle. What do? Well, you go to the next and final stance, boundary setting. So you'll notice that both feet are out of the circle. I mentioned earlier that that circle represents oftentimes an almost infinite need. And you are not infinite. And so it's absolutely appropriate that you take both feet out of the circle. And you can take both feet out of the circle for some really good reasons. It could be that you're just tired. It could be that you don't have the expertise necessary to resolve what's happening in this moment, and that you need to step out of the circle so that someone else can put their foot in the circle. Or maybe you need to step out of the circle to give that person the dignity of as much control over their life as possible, so that you don't become the controlling factor that infantilizes them. The point here is that there are many, many reasons that you need to take both your feet out of the circle of concern. But notice here that the feet are still facing the circle. In the burnout stance, they were facing away because that symbolized you were shutting down. But in this boundary setting, you are still facing the circle, and that symbolizes that you still care. You have not shut your heart to this person, and you have not shut your heart to yourself or the other aspects of your life. You just know that now is not the time. Now it's right that I have both feet out of the circle. It's hard to see that when you have both feet in someone's circle. It's hard to see that there's ever a time when it's okay to have both feet out. But it is okay. And in fact, it's vital. I work quite frequently with people who care for a loved one who's had a traumatic brain injury. And this is particularly poignant for them because a brain injury often happens in a discrete moment, an accident, a stroke, things like that. And so those people immediately jump with both feet in. And of course, if you see your spouse get hit on their bicycle and end up in the hospital with a brain injury, of course you jump in with both feet. But it becomes very hard for those caregivers in those dramatic cases like that to ever give themselves permission to have both feet out of the circle in a healthy way. I remember one woman that we had a retreat for caregivers of brain injured spouses, and they lived in New York City, and this event happened when they were in Hawaii on vacation, and it was 2 years before she got home to New York after this injury. 2 years. They went to San Francisco to get him care, and she told me after she saw this model, she said, "I've had both feet in his circle now for almost 5 years, and I see the wall coming, and I don't know what I'm going to do when it gets here." Yeah. It is okay to have your feet out of the circle. It is vital to have your feet out of the circle. When you do it in this way, when you set boundaries and leave your heart open, it gives you the ability to then know when to put your foot back in the circle. And that's good. You can be there. And you can be there with an open heart. You can be there to share yourself and be monitoring yourself to know when it's time to take the next step, which is that healthy boundary setting again. Okay. Those are the 4 quadrants that we discussed. Let me just name them one more time to remind us. So we first talked about the quadrants along the bottom, where we were swept away by the needs of another by putting both our feet into their circle. No recognition of our needs at all until we couldn't anymore and we were burned out, threw our hands up, said, "I'm done," and stepped out with our heart closed. And then we looked at the way across the top, which was we had one foot in, representing that we are giving our full open-hearted attention to people, and one foot out that says we are giving our full open-hearted attention to ourselves at the very same time. And then we also recognize that it is vital that we set boundaries that allow us to take both feet out of that person's circle so that we can rejuvenate ourselves, so that we can recognize our life is varied and contains our caregiving concerns, but is not completely consumed by our caregiving concerns. Until it's time for us to put that one foot gently back in the circle and say, "Hello, my dear, I'm back. I'm here for you." So we'll make a handout available to you later for this. So I want to open this up now. I mean, you've listened to me talk for a while here. I'm really curious. Do you see yourself here? What's come up for you? Do you want to make some comments, or do you have questions for me, or do you want to challenge me? That's good too. Tell me what I've missed. So if you want to join in, if you know how to raise your hand, do that on Zoom, or you can just wave your hand and we'll call on you, and then you can unmute and offer your comment or question. Lisa, I see you raised your hand. Great. Please unmute.
Oh, hi. I love this, and I'm not a caregiver anymore. However, I've done a lot of caregiving and I was a hospice nurse, but I feel like this is also very valuable in my life. Just having boundaries, being a very sensitive, empathically wired person with my relationships. So thank you so much because it's so simple that I can hold those visuals, the four visuals in my mind. So I feel like this is going to be great for moving forward just in life as I continue to live my life. So thank you very much.
Yeah. Yeah, Lisa, I often talk about that circle as being the person or the issue that
Yeah.
you are working with. This comes up fairly often with people who are, say, activists, and they're concerned that they're, with a variety of concerns, but their particular concern becomes their circle. And are they being swept away by it, or not? Or it could just be parenting. It could be anything. It could be your job. So yeah, use it however works for you. Yeah.
Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
Thank you, Lisa.
Crystal, Crystal, you raised your hand.
Hey,
Hi.
Crystal.
I'm wondering, I've been in a position a couple of times where I'm the only person caregiving for somebody, and
Yeah.
I'm wondering what you'd have to say about, I guess, like what advice you'd give for somebody who's caregiving alone.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I've noticed about myself and other caregivers is sometimes we put both feet in their circle because it kind of serves us. Um, it feels kind of good to be the only one who meets the needs sometimes. It feels like, oh, I'm kind of important. I'm worthwhile here. I am valuable. So it can sometimes our ego can cause us to be the only person that is providing care. Now that may not be true for you and your situation, but if you have both feet in another person's circle, it's very hard for us to see that we need to be part of a team or part of a community that offers care. And having a foot out of the circle brings that wisdom to the fore. We see that we are not the only one, and we need to not be the only one. It could also mean that we have both feet in the circle and we're taking away aspects of that person's autonomy that they may well be able to help with themselves. There's a real power imbalance when we are a care provider. I don't know if any of you have had the experience of being the one in the hospital bed, but you lay there in that hospital bed, and here come these people in uniforms that stand over you and direct your life and tell you what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. And it's infantilizing. So maybe there are ways that we can actually give the best care by finding support that broadens the number of people who are caring for them, broadens the type of care that they're receiving. So that's what would be my encouragement is that you look for ways to broaden the team in some way, um, even if that means this person can go to an afternoon day program sometimes or um, whatever it might be. Broaden the team.
Yeah, I think Crystal, you raised a really good question because it was one of my comments also that this work of working on boundaries would be different for professional caregivers compared to um, a family caregiver, compared to somebody who is, there because that's what they do. There's a big difference there. For a professional caregiver, I would hope that at the end of a shift, at the end of a work day, there is that stepping back. We don't forget the people, but we really step back and we can recharge. For family caregivers, that's one issue. And that's why, in the hospice world, there are volunteers who will offer some respite. There are some roles that can be done by someone else than the main caregiver.
And that's great, Astrid. One of the aspects of having a foot out is that you have also compassion for yourself.
Mm.
And having compassion for yourself lets you see earlier on that the way you're doing it may not be sustainable. and that you're going to have to make some shifts to find other sources of care. So that can be also doing that for yourself can also be one of the most compassionate things you can do for the person you're caring for. Because what I've seen is when the people get both feet in, let's say their spouse's circle, they wear themselves down so quickly that they now may become the person who needs care. And where does that leave their loved one? So it's about compassion, whether it's compassion to you or to the other. It keeps coming back to that. I wish you a lot of luck, Crystal. It's a tough, tough question. And these kind of answers make it sound so simple. But just trying to give you kind of a North Star to work towards instead of making it sound like, oh, well, just do it. It's hard. I know that it's hard.
So I see that, Chris, you have your hand raised, but we also have a couple of comments here where we actually have more now. And let's see. Oh, Crystal mentioned, and since we're talking about this, if that's okay, Crystal, I may read your comment. Crystal says, I was in a position where my grandma was dying, and I got this news last minute as a 27-year-old at the time. She had hospice common times, but I was mostly alone and didn't know who else to call in. Her house was also getting foreclosed and I was scrambling. Oh my God, Crystal, my heart goes out to you. This is a lot. You carried a whole lot. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and Crystal, I think we have to recognize that in our culture, we are not making the steps we need to make to care for people in a realistic and compassionate way, and that we are asking individuals like you to carry it all. And so I just want to apologize from our whole culture that you are in that position. It's unfair and it's unwarranted and it's true. So there you are. And I really hope that you can find some other sources of support
Yeah.
because you need it.
And if I may, I also would like to mention the comment we got from Eric. Eric is talking about the general concept you talked about, John. Eric says, I experienced the same concept that you described working with hospice, where life becomes real and no time for fluff or silliness. I just got there through being in combat, though, not through hospice work. So thank you, Eric, for sharing that. Yeah, there are some situations sometimes where, yeah, there is no time for fluff.
Thank you. So true.
Yeah.
Shall we take Chris's question?
Yeah, let's take Chris's question. We'll go back to the comments later on.
All right. First of all, I want to thank you, Astrid, so much for offering this series. I mean, you've brought so much information to us, compassion information. I've been facilitating a local neighborhood on Zoom grief group for 2 years. And we're in our second year. We've had a few new people, but a lot of the original people have now fallen into caregiving roles.
Mhm.
And I, oh my gosh, the washed away one is like, oh, I know 2 of my folks just will identify with that. So I want to thank you. We're calling it now Living with Grief instead of grief group. It's about living with grief, 2 years, 8 years, it doesn't matter, you know. But I want to thank you for this, and I hope it's okay to have your permission to use those for my group next Tuesday. The
Absolutely.
diagrams?
Absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. So invaluable. People don't realize grief doesn't get over, it's not a 6-week class you take, you know, or whatever. Yeah. And so just turning it over to living with grief and caregiving, it just seems to be evolving and happening for so many people who are deep still in their own grief. So I just want to thank you so much.
You know, and Chris, what I see in your description is the very fact that those folks are coming to your group indicates to me that they have one foot out of the circle at least part of the time, because they're giving themselves that compassionate care of being with others in a similar situation that can help share their load, that can help them reflect back their wisdom and their goodness to them. So I just want to say good on them, you know, for being there. And that's exactly what that foot out means. is that they're putting themselves in that kind of position.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
So we have also a comment and maybe a question, I'm not sure, from Gail. Gail says, I thought of parenting for a young child, having both feet inside the circle, and now trying to figure out how to take a foot out with an adult child who is attached to the way it's been. I now want an exchange instead of a one-way care. I'm with you, Gail.
Yeah, Gail, that's great, great application of this. Sometimes having a foot out of the circle doesn't mean that you change the outward circumstances at all. It means you change your inward circumstances. For instance, I noticed that when I worked in a hospital, I would often carry anxiety or worry or concern from the last patient that I had seen into the patient I was currently seeing. So how in my daily flow could I take a foot out of that last patient's circle so that I could be more in balance? And so I did things like every time I opened the door, I would feel the door handle in my hand and I would pause and I would just take one breath in and one breath out. Didn't take any time. Nobody noticed it. But it changed me. It changed internally my relationship to myself. Another example, I often, when you're working in a healthcare situation, you wash your hands a lot. So I began to use hand washing as a time to actively wash away concerns about what was happening before so I could be present for what's happening now and just feel that warm water on my hands, that miracle of warm water coming out of a pipe onto my hands. I mean, what kind of world do we live in that we get that? And so the outside was exactly the same. I was doing exactly the same things, but my foot out was a change inside instead that helped me. So I'm just wondering if there might be situations like that for you, that you've got this momentum of how you cared for your child, and that momentum is still carrying, and maybe the change comes from you internally, and then that will eventually show up in the external world. But you start here and let that come forward. A possibility, huh? I don't think we ever give anybody what we don't have ourselves. We can just welcome them into what it is that we have ourselves. And so if we have peace, we can welcome someone into that. And if we have anxiety and chaos and anger, well, we'll welcome people into that too. So we have to change here first.
And Diane had a question. Any suggestions for self-care, compassion before burnout would occur? And Diane is a hospice volunteer. Thank you for doing that, Diane.
Great, Diane. That's really lovely. Thanks for volunteering. Yeah, really important what you bring up. I feel really blessed. The order in which I'm ordained as a Zen monk was started by Thich Nhat Hanh in Vietnam during the American War. And he was helping people who would go into villages and after they'd been bombed, help to rebuild, to bandage people, and then they would come back from that work being exhausted. And so he set up a system by which one day a week he had what they called a day of mindfulness. Everything was laid down and they just came and rested and took care of themselves. So I inherited that. When I was ordained, I inherited that. And in my order, we spend at least 60 days a year in silence. And that for me is one day a week, plus several weeks of retreat each year. That's a kind of a dramatic way to do it. I mean, not everyone can do that, but I just wanted to tell that story because I think it's really important that if we're going to be doing this heart work in the world, We have to build in ways that we get to shed it, or it will grow in us like arterial sclerosis. You know, it'll just build up in our veins until it kills us. So we have to find ways to let that go on a regular basis. And if you're like me, you're going to find a million excuses not to do that. That's why a system is important, and why having others to do this kind of thing with is important, because our goodness will propel us forward and want to say, no, I don't have time to do that today. I really need to go back and do blah, 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 blah. But no, we have to slow down. We have to stop. We have to do things like the way we started our time together today, intentionally slowing down, giving ourselves space, letting all that settle out. So that's my advice from the people I've been learning from. Thursday is my day of mindfulness each week. I don't have computer, I don't have phone, I turn off, and it's a day of silence. And I love it.
And Claire had a comment there, which is another way to, set that boundary. She says, I was a special educator at the time I was raising my kids. I learned to use the drive time home, 20 minutes, to leave school at school so that I could be mom at home.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
separation. Yeah, that's really nice.
Lovely.
Nice. Mhm.
I felt lucky when I was in hospice that I lived on an island, that I had to take a ferry. And so the ferry was my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And John, as you said earlier, that you learn to, stop at the door and take a breath in and out. When I was a volunteer with Zen Hospice Project, that's one thing I learned from Frank Ostazeski was before ringing the bell, I stood at the door and I took a breath, and sometimes two. And then I rang the bell, and then I was ready to walk in, and I left everything else behind. And it was a great way to walk into that house.
Yes.
Mhm.
So glad you had Frank to help you, show you that way, because he's
And a
great.
great teacher. A
Yes.
great teacher.
Excellent
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah.
Well, shall we break up into small groups for a moment? What I'd like to do is invite us to have small groups, and we'll come back for more discussion. Paul, I see your fingers up. Is it Paul? Is it something quick that we need to address right away? No,
I'm not
his off. Okay.
sure. Yeah.
So what I'd like to do is send us into small groups for a discussion, and I've got 3 questions that I'd like to drop into that discussion. And we'll come back afterwards and kind of mine the gold, see what you learned in that small group. So the first question when we go into our small groups is this: which of those quadrants that we looked at is most familiar to you? Now, did you see yourself like, oh yeah, that's me, that's what I do? Which one of those is it? And then the second question would be, what leads you to your familiar quadrant? How do you get there? What is it that pushes you to do that over and over again, either for good or for ill? And then the third question, if you have time, what might help you restore balance if you find yourself pushed into one of those quadrants? What might you do to help you find a way back out again? So the questions are, which is your most familiar quadrant? What kind of gets you there? And can you imagine what might help get you back out? Got it? Those are the 3 questions. So give me just a minute here. I'm going to set you up in rooms where there'll be about 3 or 4 in each room, and then we'll do this for about 10 minutes, and then we'll come back for some more discussion. Okay? So here we go. I've got the rooms all set up, and you'll just have to accept the invitation to go into the room. Whoops, here we go. we'll all be back in just about 30 seconds. That Zoom will kick everybody back to the main room automatically.
All right.
We made it back. Great. Well, let's mine the wisdom here. What did you learn? Because, and I ask that because it might seem like that's personal question about what did you learn, but I really trust that anything that you're led to share will benefit us all because we're not that different from each other and we're all deeply interconnected. So please feel free to raise your hand and share what it is that you learned in your discussions. Grace, I see your hand is up. Grace, can you unmute yourself? We don't hear you yet.
There we go.
Yeah, gotcha.
I think that we learned that we now have some great tools,
Mm,
and because there was three of us in the group, and we basically said, well, we through our volunteer work, we walk in and we walk out, and that way we can take care of ourselves. But we might find ourselves in a situation where we can't walk out. It's a loved one. So thanks for the tools.
yeah. Did you
Yeah.
notice you were particularly drawn to any of those quadrants?
Personally, I think that I was doing the all feet in.
Mhm.
But that said, then I go all feet out when I leave. So
Yeah, right. And
yeah.
what's the quality of your heart when you leave? When you leave, is your heart feeling open or is your heart kind of self-protective? What do you
No,
think?
my heart is always filled with
Mhm.
love because I just gave someone time.
Yeah, volunteering is such a lovely model for this because it doesn't have that institutional pressure that so many of the professional caregivers experience. So I'm so
Exactly.
grateful that you have the ability to do this in a way that leaves your heart open like that.
You're welcome.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Thank you, Grace.
Sure.
Chris, I see your hand.
Wow, I find myself in three of those those diagrams within a couple hours, within an hour. I have a son, well, I do grief work, but I have a son who's 55 years old, 30 years with a head injury. And he has these sporadic meltdowns, and it's usually on the phone where he's cussing and screaming and he's hitting his head and he's blaming me. And all of a sudden I'm sucked in, I'm boom, both feet in, overwhelmed, and I'm trying to answer and be present for him. And it takes me a few minutes to go, wait a second. The first thing I do is I actually turn my back from it and step out of the circle and think, oh, that's not my problem. It's not my, leave it alone. And then I gradually turn back and I look at him and I understand more fully when I'm detached. I understand more fully his frustrations. It's not the door jam or whatever. But then when I step one foot back in, I can be in both places. I can keep my safety and still be me and use the skills I've had from all the years of doing hospice work. But I also can still be there and present him and presence him and let him know he's being heard. But when it hits me right off and he's swearing and wants to kill himself, I can't. I have to for my own self. I'm almost 80 years old. I've got to turn away for a minute.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then, as you say, I just appreciated your diagram so much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And let me just tell your story back a little bit in terms of the model.
Yeah.
So what I heard was you get this interaction with your son, and it's shocking, and it draws you in with both feet, right? And I really resonate with that because so often what draws us in with both feet is early psychological stuff, our core suffering, and I can imagine that this is old stuff for you, with your son. So you get thrown right in there.
Right.
But then what I heard was that you talked about taking both your feet out, but you didn't shut down. You're saying, right now, I need to give myself this protection from this really difficult thing. So I've set a boundary here, and you're breathing, you're doing whatever you're doing. And then I heard you talk about you put one foot back in as you were listening to him the whole time that you were listening. And that was a really beautiful illustration of you could put one toe in his circle if that's all that you can offer in that moment. But that was using that skillful connection of having one foot in, one foot out, playing with the balance. So I just wanted to kind of voice it in that model because I think it was a beautiful illustration of how to use that model to do what it is that you do with your son.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And it's not like 3 days or 5 weeks. It's within an hour.
Yes.
It's within an hour. And I think it's a valuable tool to anytime anybody gets overwhelmed. And like you said, it gets triggered, this deep stuff, that gets triggered. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my own failure gets triggered.
Sure.
All the things I've healed.
Yeah, right.
Triggered.
Exactly.
Because he's pointing his finger and telling me so.
Yeah.
You kicked me
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Got
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Oh gosh, thank you so much.
Eric, I see that your hand is up.
Yeah, good afternoon. So we
Hi.
had a wonderful conversation in our group, and I think I tend to fall typically in the boundary setting quadrant.
Uh-huh.
Um, my background is, United States Marine Corps veteran with 2 combat tours, and then I worked for 12 years with Department of Corrections in a maximum security prison. So
Wow.
boundary setting, like my home, where I'm still focused on what's going on around me. I'm still engaged in what's happening, but it's not it's not even, so I have to work on getting that investment, that one step in.
Oh,
Um, but the other piece of that, and we had, like I said, we had a lovely discussion, was that we, um, both from different perspectives, different backgrounds, different histories, or whatever, recognize that we know that we have to care for ourselves. Self-care is super important. If you do not care for yourself and be there for that other person as well. I relate it to team tactics and team movement in both the prison and in the military. Um, whereas if you can throw yourself to the wayside and just continue to try to sacrifice for the team, but then you won't be there, and then everybody else is going to have to pick up that slack. If
yeah.
you care for yourself and you're good with yourself, and then there for the team, then you'll continuously be able to continue to put out product for that team, hold up your part of that setting. So, and then the same thing goes for caregiving, right? If you don't care for yourself, then eventually you're going to get to that burnout stage and not be capable of doing the care that you're so passionate about. So you kind of ruin yourself for that. So way different paths to get to the same thing, but
Yeah.
the same end result and understanding in that growth and that learning for that piece. Now I work for DSHS in Washington State, so I'm mentally shifting a lot,
Mhm.
but there's a lot of commonalities. And
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Eric, for sharing that. It's really moving to hear this from your background and how that boundary setting is such an important part of your work. And another thing I heard in what you said was about caring for yourself and how vital that is in caring for another person. And it's one of the reasons why I call these connective boundaries. Because if you really do have that foot out and the foot in, it begins to blur the line about who is receiving the compassion. Like you said, if you don't care for yourself, it leaves the person who is your concern worse off. And so offering compassion for yourself is actually offering compassion to the other person. So how do you define me versus you there? It's really, it's us. So compassion always comes out. It's just a matter of where it's directed in that moment, and it benefits you both at the same time. Yeah. So blessings to you for the work that you do. We need you so much to doing that really, the work that I could never do. I mean, that I could never, I would just melt into a puddle. And so I'm so glad that you're out there in the world doing this kind of work and doing it in a way that is so open-hearted and compassionate. I
We
think I
have
froze
we
there
have
for a
a
second.
yeah,
So we
we all froze for a second, I think. There is a question in the chat from Diane, if we
Mhm.
may. Can you say a bit more about about what draws us with both feet? I have always wondered
Yeah.
why we.
Well, yeah, Diane, there's probably as many answers to that question as there are people here, but it's really been my experience that it's usually our deep psychological mental formations that sweep us in with both feet. Let me just tell my own story as an illustration of it, and it'll be different in particulars to your alls, but it's probably somewhat similar. Um, my dad was a rather difficult guy. He was a cowboy, and he was abusive to me. And I had put up some boundaries about being around him because it was just so difficult. But I, from an early age, was swept into a relationship with my father in which I was responsible for his emotions because I quickly learned as a young child that if I didn't manage his emotions, then his emotions would swell and there would be anger or there would be violence as a result. And so that was my early mental formation, was to be swept into my dad's emotions and feel responsible for managing them. And he died just this last July, and I was his care provider as this was going on. And I was so grateful that I don't know how this happened, but somehow I found a way to be with him without being swept into that cycle. After being swept into that cycle all my life, I don't know what it was. Grace, I don't know. But I could be myself and I could be compassionate and care for him. But I didn't have to be swept into his anger and all that went with it. Um, I wish I could tell you how to do that. I can't. It wasn't my accomplishment. It just happened for me. But that's a story that kind of tells. Yeah.
Well, thank
Gosh,
you,
we are out of
John.
time, aren't we? Gosh, we're
Yeah.
just goes so fast.
Yeah. For those of you here, I just put in the chat a site link because what we just talked about today was basically the first foundation of an 8 foundations workshop that John offers at wisecaregiving.org. So you have that link in the chat. You will get a recording, you will get the chat. John, thank you so much.
Well, thank you all for being here and for giving the world your heart. It's just I'm so grateful to you all for what you do, and yeah, thank you for welcoming me into your circle.
Yeah,
Could we
very,
close?
very
Could we
grateful.
close with a poem? I could offer a poem on our
Yes,
way out.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
Yes.
This poem is called "Clearing" by Martha Postlewaite.
Mm.
Do not try to save the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your own cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world so worthy of rescue. Martha Postlewaite. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
My email will be on that little sheet, and I'd love to hear if you find good, new, and novel ways to use these quadrants and this model. I'd love to learn from you. So don't hesitate to reach out and send me an email.
Thank you, John.
All
Thanks,
right.
John.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Yeah.